incredibly popular actually, because we do get quite a small number of students applying for veterinary every year, and it's great to have your expertise on board, Ben. We've got quite a varied audience today, I would say from about year 9 all the way through to students that are waiting for grades in August to then start in September. So I think your advice is going to be very varied today. Okay, so the first question that I was going to ask you was, when did you decide that you were going to pursue veterinary science?
You know, I've been asked multiple times in the past. First and foremost, thanks for everyone for popping your heads in. I think when it's sunny outside and you're on half term, I think yeah, that's going above and beyond turning up for a meeting at lunchtime for that. So well done for tuning in. For me, it was actually a strange sort of coming around about, because my little sister, or certainly this is the way I remember it because I was young at the time. I was about 9 years old and I think she was about 7. And she had wanted to be a vet, and at the time there was a TV show called Vets in Practice that was on, I think it was on BBC or something years ago, and there was this one image, and it was a cow that had a thing called a twisted stomach, and what happens in that case is, as a vet, you basically have to, for want of better terminology, cut open the cow and untwist the stomach, and that's a surgical job. And my mum and dad always reflect on it by sort of turning around and saying they watched my sister go green and didn't want to be a vet anymore, and my eyes just lit up. And they just said from that point on, everything. And there was always a few little bits and bobs throughout the years that, like, you know, I'd maybe change my mind for a day and I'd say, oh, I want to be a dentist. And then I went and saw a bit of practice in a dental practice and said, oh, no, this isn't for me. And I thought about law, but it always came back to veterinary and animal stuff. And, you know, we'd always had dogs as a family and stuff like that. But I saw work experience in a vet, and it was awesome. So that for me was like, from 9 years old, I was one track mind with the occasional distraction, but it was always veterinary was the core.
Okay, I mean, obviously the commitment to veterinary from a young age is really important because of the expectation of work experience. So what was your experience of work experience, and when did you start that?
Yeah, mine was very, very varied. And so for those of you who are from South Liverpool, I grew up just outside Wavertree. So there wasn't much by way of access to sort of rural animals. Other than that, there was a lot of staffies, but apart from that, there wasn't much around on the streets. So it was, you had to look outside the box to create opportunity. And even at that age, you know, I was very keen to sort of seek out ways to get insight into animal stuff. And it's a lot harder nowadays because of health and safety and things. You know, I started looking at doing stuff in like 1998, 99, which makes me feel massively old chatting to you lot now. But it's that sort of, it was easier to go about getting it. So there was a vet at the end of my road with a very sort of old-fashioned vet, a guy called John Adams, and I went in and did Saturday mornings there, just like helping out on reception or any surgeries. It's how we ended up with like a whole menagerie of animals in our house, because every time I'd go in, I'd turn up on a Saturday afternoon, Mum, here's this rabbit. Someone was going to get it put to sleep, and I think, you know, my parents must have been sick of me by the time I'd finished, sort of on every Saturday, sort of, oh, we got space for this. I think at one stage we ended up with like 16 rabbits. But it was always like, you know, going to stables, you know, any sort of farm opportunities. They were, of course, hard to come by because I was always reliant on Mum and Dad dropping us off at that stage and picking us up. I was lucky my dad at the time worked for a finance company out in Chester, so I spent a month at Chester Zoo, and that was awesome. But I applied for that like 2 years beforehand, so it's so competitive to do these kind of things and to get access. It's things like going to riding stables, but I think the one thing what we realise as a profession now is that showing the commitment. Academia is one side of it. You need to be relatively intelligent. You don't need to be, you know, sort of rocket scientist level of intelligence. but it's showing the commitment to say, look, I haven't just decided one Saturday that I wanted to be a vet and then applied to vet school on the Monday morning. It's saying, right, okay, look, I've spent a couple of years, and it might only be going to the local stables and looking out. It doesn't have to be in a vet, but it's showing that commitment to getting a bit of animal health experience.
Okay. So which A levels did you take then?
Now you're asking. I think it was. I think I did biology, chemistry, physics, and general studies.
Okay.
And so yeah. So the big thing with veterinary, and it's become a lot less sort of stringent. I know people that have got into vet school haven't done English and things like that as well, because a big part of our job as vets is communication. And it's actually the dealing with the animal side of things is only part of that, but we've got to be able to relate that sort of interpretation of what an animal is sick with to an owner. And that's the most important part, because an owner has to understand what we want and need to do to make their pet better. So things like, there used to be this school of thought that you have to just do science. And it was that type of things. And to a large extent, things like chemistry and biology are key. Physics to a lesser extent. I know people that have done geography, people that have done economics. So it's not as strict. You have to do these subjects in order to get in. A lot of people nowadays will actually do veterinary as a second degree. So they'll go and do some kind of animal science degree or zoology or something like that first. And then off the back of that, they'll then go and do veterinary after that. So it's not a very, very prescriptive, you have to do these. Of course, the sciences and maths give you an advantage in terms of things like, understanding the chemistry of the drugs that we're doing. A lot of our what I call preclinical years are all about learning about the anatomy of the animals, learning about the chemistry of the drugs that we use and how we can use them in a safe fashion. So obviously having that science background and understanding is brilliant. But not essential.
Okay. And then how did you choose your university course then? Can you remember your choices and how you made that decision?
Yeah, I was in a really fortunate position. So when I applied to vet school, there were only 6 vet schools in the UK. There's 9 now, and that I guess is a reflection of how popular we are as a profession. But there was only 6 vet schools and you could only apply to 4. I couldn't afford to go and live in London, so we cut that one off the list straight away. And then the other options were, he says with great confidence, Liverpool, Bristol, Glasgow and Edinburgh that I applied to, and Cambridge was the other one. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm not massively academic, so I didn't think my chances of getting into Cambridge were massively high. So I basically went, right, okay, the 2 in Scotland and Liverpool and Bristol were my applications. I got straight rejections from the 2 Scottish universities just off the back of my UCAS application. I had an interview at Bristol and I didn't get offered a place at that. I had an interview at Liverpool and I got offered my place off that. So my choice of university was really straightforward. It was a case of, as long as I get my grades, I go to Liverpool. But at the time, and actually, to a large extent still now, Liverpool was the best vet school in the UK. And it had been that year after year. So, for me, it was a blessing in disguise, because much as though I hate to admit it, I'm something of a mummy's boy. So being sort of 10 minutes from mum, and mum's cooking and mum's washing machine at university was really quite a useful addition through the 6 years I was there. But yeah, and I think ultimately, it's you make the best of wherever you end up. And I think, it is such a competitive degree that getting in is the challenge. And, I know some people that have been really fortunate to get into 3-4 universities and have then had a difficult decision to make, but there's lots that don't get an offer first time. And I know one of my best friends who is, I work on her on a lot of projects now, she got rejected from uni 5 times and got in on her 6th attempt. So to a large extent, it's getting into vet school is the great success, and it doesn't really matter where you go, you all come out with a similar interchangeable degree.
And so, knowing how highly competitive it was, did you have a plan B at all when you were applying? Did you think, okay, if Liverpool doesn't work out, what might I do?
Yeah, my plan B was to work in Tesco's for a year and to
Oh,
reapply,
okay.
uh, which my mum and dad weren't massively enamoured with. But to me, I was transfixed on I'll get into vet school,
Yeah.
and of course, when you look back at it with the benefit of maturity, you can turn around and you can say, okay, well, actually, Plan B may well have been I'd gone and done a second degree, and may have looked at other medical degrees, dentistry, things like that. The irony is, I sort of don't have much patience for people. I have much more patience with animals. So it's yeah, my family don't get much sympathy when we're sick or injured. It's kind of like I'm a family of doctors. My wife's a paediatrician. My sister's a gastroenterologist. Brother-in-law's a neurosurgeon. My brother's an army doctor. So I'm surrounded by medics, and it just doesn't appeal at all. But to me, it was always going to be something in that animal health sphere. And veterinary, it has served me very well over the years. But again, it would probably have been something that fed into veterinary ultimately.
You did touch on this before. Obviously, the postgraduate route is very popular now, and it allows students to sort of make a more informed decision. And also, undergraduate level is so competitive. So I just wondered, you did mention a course before. Do you have any other alternatives that you think it might be worth students looking at? Sort of a undergraduate degree that would then lead to being able to pursue a postgrad degree in veterinary science.
Yeah, and I think there's all kinds of courses out there, and again, none of them are sort of a closed door. And I think what the veterinary profession is starting to do, and it's not happened overnight, it's been several years, is identifying that we as a profession used to be very inward looking. We used to look to vets to lead on everything, but actually there's so many learnings we can take from other professions and people that have done other things, that actually having people with expertise in those areas could bring massive benefits into us as a profession. So, I know one vet who's done a PhD in philosophy, and then did veterinary off the back of all of that. So people have gone in from all angles, but of course there's the obvious one: biomedical science, bioveterinary science, biology, chemistry, all of the obvious science degrees. But as I say, none of them are a barrier. And of course, when you're at 15, 16, 17, there's this massive pressure on you nowadays to sort of say you have to know what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And the reality of that is you don't. I look at, I've been qualified as a vet for 12 years now, and my career has taken multiple different paths. I was an equine vet for 6 years, then I swapped to do companion animals, so dogs and cats. I've done a couple of years in farm animal practice, and I'm now and business within the veterinary sphere. So you don't need to be sort of shoeboxing yourself into, right, okay, I've got to do this and that's my only way into that. I think don't put too much pressure on yourselves at this stage to say, look, this is my only way of getting to do that one thing, because who you are now is very different to who you'll be at 25, who you'll be at 30, and certainly who you'll be at 40. So yes, if you don't go down the traditional route, it's certainly not a closed off avenue for you.
I want to ask you more about sort of your day-to-day job and sort of like, sort of a day in the life of Ben. But before I move on to that, can I ask, do you have any pointers for any younger students that are watching or may listen to this again, sort of, much further down the school, so maybe are thinking about GCSE options and anything that they can be doing now to help make it an informed decision?
I think the best thing you can do, and this isn't just looking at veterinary, this is looking at all other career avenues you take, is don't just look at one thing. Always, if there's something that really gets you ticking. So, for me, I always got, that little bit of excitement and passion from anything to do with veterinary, and nothing that I ever looked at really impacted on that. And that for me, I always say to anyone when they're making any decision in life, look at several other options, and if you come back to what your first option was, then yeah, that's the right thing for you to be focusing on. But things like, trying to get work experience, and we get that it's difficult getting it in veterinary practices now, but there's so many different ways, things like going and doing bits of lambing on farms, and certainly those of you that live up more sort of Southport direction and out towards Autumn, there's obviously a lot of farming up that way, farmers that will be doing calving and lambing and things like that, and they are invariably, the good ones are really happy to share their wisdom with you and their knowledge. And these are busy and they're businesses, so they have to look at making money. But what they're always happy about, and so many of my vet mates spent time in their childhood going and doing lambing, going and working on a ride in stables, going to the zoo and getting a bit of insight there. There's no experience that you do that won't help you in making that decision. In terms of like deep GCSE choices and that, I think, like I say, it's keeping your options open, and don't make every decision at that stage of your life based on something that may or may not come to pass when you're 17, 18, and then later in life as well. So, having a good broad spectrum of subjects, of course, play to your strengths. If you're really good at maths and if you're really good at sciences, then have them as your focus. You have got to identify where your skills are. I'm terrible at English. I literally scraped through my GCSE Englishes. So there's not. It's always about playing to your strengths, but using them to give you some insight. And as I say, have a look at some different careers, and you may find that one of them actually gets you really excited, and you look at that in more detail as well.
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. And then obviously for the other end then, so I know that there's definitely a student on here that is sitting on a couple of offers and is due to start in September. Do you have any advice for anyone that's just about to embark on an undergraduate degree?
Enjoy it. Like, literally enjoy it. You get to be, this is the one thing that I look back on. I managed bars all the way through uni, and I had a lovely time. I worked pretty much full time. My dad still tells me to this day that he has no idea how a student who worked full time all the way through uni managed to leave with so much debt. But it is just a case of embrace it. Like, it's get your exams. Obviously, it's a weird time for you guys at the minute, and it's certainly something that I can't comprehend. I have to say, looking back, if mine was based on my mock predictions, I would not have gone to vet school. That was very much the sort of rocket that I needed to focus my attention to studying for my A-levels. But it's a case of embrace it. Just literally say, look, I'm going to go and be a student. It's easy for it to become all-encompassing and your life to totally revolve around one thing. But actually, there's such a rich tapestry of things to do. Like, I played hockey at uni, I played footy at uni, I went out a lot at uni, and it's having, it's very easy in a sort of professional degree like veterinary to become completely encapsulated and surrounded by your vet mates talking about vet things, working in veterinary groups all the time. And actually, I was really lucky because I spent a lot of my time with my medic mates, who, granted, they were still going down the slightly same geeky path that all of me and my vet mates were, but it was something a little bit different. And it wasn't just your entire life revolving around one thing. So when you get to uni, I don't know how it's going to work this year, but when I started, we had Freshers Fair, and we just went round every club and group, largely just getting freebies. But there's always something that sort of lit your fire a little bit and said, oh, I'll go and have a little try of that, and I'll go and have a little try of that. But definitely, embrace uni, like, just go nuts, and have a lovely time doing it. The academia side of things, as long as you pass, that's, when you qualify as a vet, nobody ever asks you if you got a first or a 2-1 or that. They just say, oh, great, you're a vet, great. For instance, our pass mark was 50% in our finals, and in 2 of my subjects, I got 50 and 51%, which to me was the perfect amount of studying. But I passed, and that's all people ever ask is, it's like, oh, what did you do at uni? Veterinary? Oh, great, so you passed, you're a vet. So, if you want to be top of the class, fantastic, go nuts, but you don't have to be. And I think, it's just a case of you get this opportunity in life once at uni, and absolutely, like, embrace it and just have a lovely time.
And what was the structure of the course like at Liverpool then? So what did you experience on your course?
So we had preclinical and clinical years. So the preclinical was 3 years, and then I took an extra year because I took a step back to do a master's for a year, which was in infection and disease control, which seems quite poignant at the minute in this COVID-19 world that we're living in. So for me, that was an opportunity to just step back from veterinary for a year. It was still related to it. But we did all of our anatomy and physiology and all of that, the pharmacology and everything in the first 3 years, so that when we then got to our years 4 and 5, which are our clinical years, we had an understanding of what the animals were, how the drugs worked that we were giving them, why we were giving them, and so on and so forth. Nowadays, there's a bit more of a sort of merging of the two, where you have a little bit of your clinical work mixed in early on, just to frankly, to keep you engaged and to keep you, sort of realizing what the point is, because of course in your first 3 years it's easy, you don't, to all intents and purposes, you don't really see an animal, other than if you've got a pet. Now we have to do things called extramural studies. So where everybody else gets their 3 and 4 months off for summer and go traveling and having a lovely time, sadly, as a vet student, you spend many of those weeks gaining extra experience. And that is things like, going and working on a farm, going and working in the stables, all the things that we've touched on earlier, but giving you an insight into the different industries that we as vets work alongside, and our role in those little ecosystems. Because of course anything to do with animals will at some point on the journey have a veterinary involvement.
And what are the best things and the worst things about your job currently then? What do you think?
So there's always a very interesting line, and this is something that I wasn't aware of when I applied to vet school, and I now make sure that everyone that I speak to is aware of. This is a hard job, and I don't say that lightly, and I almost say this to try and put people off, and my attitude is different to some, in that I spend a lot of time trying to put people off for different things, and if you still want to do that after someone has spent a lot of that time and effort putting you off, then that shows to me that you're really interested in that thing. And if nobody tells you the hard and bitter truths about stuff, then actually you're going in blinkered and you don't know the reality of it. So I'll be dead honest, this is a really, really hard job. There's a lot of emotional baggage that comes with it, because you can go from being in a consult where you're putting a dog to sleep with a family, and seeing them quite upset, to your next consult can be a family who've got a brand new puppy. So there's a real emotional roller coaster every day. And I don't think that can be understated. There is a lot of hard emotional baggage that goes with this as a job, but the rewards are fantastic. I will, however, caveat it with one thing. Everyone thinks that vets are multimillionaires. I've got some bad news for you. Most vets that I know drive either an Astra or a Mondeo, not a Range Rover or a Ferrari. The average vet salary in the UK is £40,000. So whilst that might sound an awful lot when you're at this age, it's not massive. So if you're looking at going into veterinary because you think you're going to be minted, go and be a dentist. So that's the first thing. And I think it's important to be clear about that, because I have to say, when I went to vet school, I thought I'd earn a lot more than I did. Now, as it happens, I've created a career path that's enabled me to, get a nice house, nice car. Fortunately, I have a very intelligent wife who has a very good salary, so she can support me and it works both ways. So there's that side of things there that is important to identify. It is fantastic when you have cases that go well. I've had cases that, we've had on the operating table that have been at death's door. And when you see that case come back for a post-operative check, genuinely, there's no feeling like it, or for me anyway, that is me and my team have fixed that animal that would, without our intervention, have been dead. And that is fantastic. But as I say, you know, we get to work to meet people from all walks of life. Like, you know, you'll speak to people, I'm sure, that have little black books of contacts. And my wife thinks it's hilarious because I literally know someone, whenever we need anything done, I know someone who's done it because of my connections through work. And I've built up a fantastic network of not just clients, but friends. You know, my clients have very much become friends over the years. And what I love as a vet, and I don't think you necessarily get this in other professions, we have a real relationship of trust with our clients. And, you know, the inside stories I have on people's families because they properly open up to us about their pets. You know, I could write books and books about these things. But that's what I see as a real privilege because it is just, you know, you're part of people's lives. And that is something that's quite rare and special in a career. And it's hard. You know, I've had cases that have brought me to tears over the years because it's cases that I've known the family, I've known the patient for several years. And when it comes to them making that decision, it's hard. When you know it's for the right reasons, you know that it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't make it any less hard. But, you know, we are so privileged as vets with what we do. And you know, again, purely from a personal perspective, I couldn't recommend it as a career more, but it is hard work. It's stressful. There's long hours. You know, I couldn't tell you the amount of times that, you know, we close the practice at 6:30. Somebody comes in with an emergency at 6:25, and all of a sudden my dinner plans have changed, and you know, it's then things where stuff goes on hold because it is a truly caring profession. But it's great because actually I get to do what I love.
So what does your average day look like then? Or is there not an average day?
Yeah, there isn't an average. So I do two things now. So I do clinical work. I also have a couple of tech businesses that I work with. So when I look at my clinical life, which is of course what you guys are all interested in, anything can happen. And it literally is anything can happen. So when I was an equine vet, I had such a great time because I just drove around the countryside. I lived up in Northumberland at the time. Beautiful scenery, driving from farm to farm, treating horses, a couple of really nice race yards. I'm big into my racing, so I enjoyed that side of things. Stop in a lay-by for lunch, occasionally a little nap. I'd have my dog in my car with me. Like, you know, it was brilliant. But that lifestyle quickly got old for me and I wanted a new challenge. So when I swapped to dogs and cats, it's a very different way of working because you're in a building all day. And it can be intense. So where I was an equine vet, you sort of clamber in to try and get all your consults done and all of your visits done by 5 o'clock so you can get to the beer garden. The small animal life is very different. It's longer hours, at least during the normal working day. So generally speaking, you'll get into work about 8:30 in the morning and you may not leave until 7, 8 o'clock at night. So they're long days. And if someone comes in with an emergency when you're due to go on your lunch, it just tends to, you know, lunch tends to be a quick packet of crisps and someone throwing a sandwich into your mouth while you catch it. So it can be really busy, but you'll do consults, we'll do operating. You know, everybody has their own little bits that they like. Some people really like surgery, some people hate it. You know, I work in practices where one vet does all of the consults because that's what they're really good at and they enjoy. And other vets do all of the operating because that's what they enjoy. So every practice has got its own little differences, but it's finding the right practice to work in for you. And when you're part of a good team, like, I mean, we're really lucky because we have vet nurses, and vet nurses are absolutely the people who hold the practices together because you just, as a vet, you're kind of dealing with that case, dealing with that case, dealing with another case, but the vet nurses will fill you in on everything that's going in. But, you know, you can have normal consults all day and then just 1 or 2 emergencies comes in and frankly, all hell breaks loose because everyone's just trying to get the cases looked after to keep them nice and healthy.
Can you tell us about the other side of your job then? So obviously you do your day-to-day veterinary job and then you've also set up a sort of supportive business, haven't you, on the side that sort of supplements your current career. So can you tell our students a little bit about that then?
Yeah, sure. So I found that when I was in practice, it was ticking a lot of boxes for me, but there was other stuff I wanted to do, and I've been really lucky to have other vets and nurses help me through my first sort of 10 years of my career. So the businesses that I set up were all based around veterinary. And my most recent one, I got some investment for last year. I got investment for that business on the basis that I am what would be classed as, an industry expert. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm an expert vet. What it means is that I know and understand the veterinary profession. So my career as a vet and the experience that I got as an equine vet and as a small animal vet gave me a lot of insight into my profession. And that means that, we identified what some of the weaknesses were with the profession. So that means that people, when you start looking, and I touched on it earlier, about how you're not necessarily going to do the same thing for 30, 40, 50 years, but actually that investment in yourself and upskilling yourself and learning about what your chosen profession is will mean that in years down the line, you won't even think about it, the first 10 years, but years down the line, the first opportunity, that will enable you to look at developing other income streams. So that gave me a really nice, healthy other income stream. And my new startup, I'm going to do that down the line as well.
I want to put it to the students because I realise I've completely monopolised the conversation here. The things that I think they might want asking that I might have completely missed the mark. So do any students in the chat have any questions they'd like to ask them while we've got it? So yeah, a couple of times. So just bear with me. Okay. How did you adapt your revision style from A levels to your first year as an undergraduate? So sort of what was the difference? What did you find that the difference was, and how did you adapt to it?
Yeah, kind of a funny story, really. I didn't, and that's why I failed my first 4 exams in vet school. So it is very different. So the way I kind of described it, and again, I can't speak for how it is now, but when I did my A levels, it was quite sort of regurgitative. So I'm quite lucky that I've got a decent memory. So I could basically learn the textbooks, and then when they asked the questions in my A-level exams, I could just regurgitate what was in the textbooks, and that was the answers they were looking for. Now, it's different when you go to university, because actually what you have to demonstrate is that understanding of the science behind it. You need to show that you understand what is going on. And it didn't happen overnight. So basically, I had a really good Christmas, my first, because we had exams in January and exams in June at vet school. And yeah, so basically my first set of exams, I didn't do much studying and failed all 4. So that was a real eye-opener for me. I didn't have another resit after those sets all the way through vet school, but it was all about kind of, you're not going to go from how you learn for your A-levels to how you learn for university overnight. It's very much an evolutionary process. So one of my favorite quotes in life is, without failure, you can't appreciate success. And it's almost good to fail at something, because actually when you fail, you will learn much more from that. Because if you're passing and flying through all your exams, then actually what I'm doing is fine. I'm not learning from this. For me, that was a real learning in how I needed to study. So it wasn't just a case of regurgitating it. It was a case of going through my textbooks and taking real learning from it. So I went from just reading textbooks at A levels to making notes, and then making shorter notes on my notes, and then making shorter notes on my shorter notes, until the stage where I could write, the one word on a topic, and I could then regurgitate a paragraph based on my knowledge and understanding of that. So don't put too much pressure on yourself to sort of go into uni and know how to study for uni exams. Again, learning has changed so much now. When I started at vet school, there wasn't iPads, there wasn't much by way of tech, but there's so many educational platforms out there now. And again, it's not just a case of, it's learning about how you learn as an individual, because everybody learns differently. I know I've got a friend of mine who literally just reads a textbook and can regurgitate it to you. And whilst I'm incredibly jealous of that particular quality, his depth and understanding of it is different to mine, because I've actually invested the time in truly getting to know the subject matter. So for me, the best type of learning is always about spending time on it. And, it doesn't mean sit down at your desk at 9 o'clock and don't leave until 9 o'clock at night, but it's learning how you as an individual learn. I don't know whether that kind of answers it for you, but it's a case of, it's a constantly evolving process. So making notes on your notes and things like that.
Okay, the next question is, when or how did you decide what you wanted to specialise in? For example, the equine, or when did you make that decision that you were going to go into that was your interest?
Yeah, so this is where veterinary is really great compared to things like dentistry and medicine, because with dentistry and medicine, once you kind of choose a career path, you're on that path then. For instance, my wife's a pediatric cardiologist, as I said earlier. She went down that path and was very much sort of, okay, there's no deviation from this path now. This is my plan. This is my training plan for 10 years. But when you've spent 10 years training in something, to then go back and train in something else is a real, it's not to say you can't do it, but it's a real step, not necessarily backwards, but across. What's great about veterinary is you can wake up one morning and say, actually, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to go and do this. Now, I had a real baptism of fire. So when I started vet school, I wanted to be a small animal orthopedic surgeon. And then I got to do orthopedics and I was like, actually, this is boring. I don't like it. So I decided that wasn't for me. When I got to my clinical years of training, I'd always sort of liked horses, but when I got into doing the equine work, that I found really exciting. So at that stage of my life, that was the right thing for me to go down. But then after a few years, that started to wear a bit thin, getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to jump in my car to go out to a mare who was foaling, and then not getting home till 6 o'clock and then getting up at 8 o'clock to go back to work, grew a bit old and tiresome. And I thought, I can't do this for another 40 years. So I made the decision to say, right, I'm going to go and retrain. Now, actually, the first job that I had when I swapped from equine to smallies, I lasted 3 weeks in, and it was an absolute car crash of a job. And I then had to go and find something different. And I guess what I'd say from that is that, not every job you ever go into will be perfect, but it's identifying the ones that work for you. And if they don't work for you, then look for an alternative. Like for me, when I swapped to dogs and cats and budgies and rabbits and gerbils and everything else that everyone seems to have nowadays, it was a really tough learning curve because I was already 5 years behind. I was coming up with new graduates who were 5, 6 years younger than me, who were at the same level as me. I could deal with clients a lot better than them because I've been doing it a long time. But the great thing with it is you can just decide. And then after a few years of working for other people, I decided I wanted to work for myself. So I set up doing my own veterinary stuff. And that's the great thing with it, is that, you can work according to your own timescale, but all of that hinges on the investment in yourself. If you don't invest in yourself and you don't upskill yourself so that you can be competent at what you're doing, whether that's veterinary or anything else, then actually you're not going to have anything to offer anybody else, whether that's an employer or a client. So as long as you're making that constant investment to make yourself better at what you do, that's all you can do, and you can change your mind at any time.
So linked to that, another question is, did you find it easy to transition from equine to small animal, sort of remembering your skills and knowledge from veterinary school?
I would probably have a different answer to the vet nurses that I worked with. I did, because I had a supportive team. The first job that I went to, I didn't. So that ended up I was there 3 weeks and 7 minutes. when me and the boss went on the Monday morning, look, this just isn't working. He was going to pay me through the rest of the month, and then I had to go and find something different. And that was a real kick in the teeth, because I'd never lost a job or anything before. That was sort of a, what's going on here? And that was a real challenge to think, actually, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I can't do this, and I need to go back to equine or find something different. But the practice that I went to after that was incredible. And I moved from the Midlands up to Newcastle, and the team there was supportive. And I had a lot of mental blocks about things that I couldn't do. And my boss, who was a little old-fashioned, but got the job done, just made me do the things that I didn't feel I could do until I could do them with my eyes closed. And that, again, it's that sort of self-investment of saying, right, okay, you can do the stuff you can do. You don't need to worry about that. But the stuff that you can't do, that was focusing my attention on that until a time where it didn't faze me anymore. So yes, it was, to say it was easy would be wrong. It was a challenge, both mentally and physically, because that level of exhaustion of relearning everything again. But I made myself a promise that after 2 years of the swap, I would be competent to be able to go and do it on my own. And sure enough, that was the path that we followed. And after 2 years, I went and started working for myself.
There's another question. Can you specialise in just one animal? And I guess a question that I would add on to the end to that would be, would you recommend that as well?
I mean, you can, I know pig vets, I know poultry vets, and the great thing with those they are such niche areas. There's only about 40 poultry vets in the UK. I think there's about 15 pig vets. So they've got, those are the guys who actually earn a lot of money because they're so niche and bespoke. It's such a personal decision. For me, I love the variety of seeing a dog, then seeing a cat, then seeing a budgie, then trying to avoid being bitten and knocked out by the budgie. Like that's what I love. I don't like doing the same thing all the time. But for some people, I mean, I know friends who are specialists in all kinds, I know oncology specialists, and veterinary is catching up to medicine in the number of specialties that we have now. We have soft tissue surgeons, we've got internal medicine specialists, oncology guys, orthopedics guys, neurology guys, dermatology guys, equine specialists, cow specialists, but it's each to their own. And again, that's part of the great thing about it is you can carve out your own career path.
Okay, that's really good. Actually, that was something I didn't really know actually, and I did think you would say that probably wouldn't be a good idea. So it's interesting that actually it could possibly be a really good idea to specialise in one particular animal.
It's doing what you like. I think that's the biggest thing. And I remember someone telling me once, if you enjoy what you do, then you don't actually really ever work a day in your life.
Yeah.
And that is so true. Again, not just of me doing what I'm doing, but anybody doing a job that they enjoy. I mean, you could be a mortgage broker. If that's what you love, then if you're happy doing what you're doing, that's frankly the only important thing.
There's a couple of other questions that have come in. So would you recommend intercalating in another degree?
Again, I loved it because it basically gave me a whole nother year at uni before I had to grow up. So that it's personal. I kind of look at veterinary and I think we shoulder a lot of emotional baggage as vets. Had I not intercalated, I'd have been 22. I'd have just about been turning 23 when I graduated, and for the pressure of the job and the baggage that goes with the job, I didn't feel, and I see a lot of vets that come out at that age, and it's like, the R levels, it's a lot to bear on your shoulders when you're that age. You're still discovering who you are yourself. You're still growing up and maturing in your own life. I mean, I'm 35 and I'm barely mature enough for it now. But it's that sort of, if it gives you an extra year, and again, it's that thing of, if you're going to intercalate, don't just intercalate for the sake of doing it. Intercalate in something that you find enjoyable. Like I found, I did infection and disease control because I found those particular topics interesting when I was in my first 3 years. I've got friends who intercalated in parasitology, and I can think that nothing more weird and creepy than spending a whole year looking at bugs. But it's what they enjoyed, and it is, again, it's a personal thing. Some people will choose a degree with an intercalated element, before you've even applied. And that's fine. If that's what you want to do, if you decide that that's the avenue you go down, brilliant, go for it. But for me, it was a case of I discovered during my journey that was something that I think would help me when I graduated.
Another question was, did you find it hard going into another cohort? Obviously, sort of, doing the, yeah.
Sort of. The difference is I managed the student union bar, so I knew most of the vet school before that point, so I knew a lot of them beforehand. Again, vet school it's a funny thing, really, because it's almost a microclimate and micro sort of community within the university. So, I touched on earlier saying that it's really important to have non-vet mates. I look at some of my mates, and don't get me wrong, they're all sound people, but they're vets who are married to vets, who lived with vets at vet school, who, socialise with vets, and their family holidays are with other vets. Now, personally, that would drive me mad. But it's a case of, just having those different connections. But no, dropping into another year to me was all right because I knew them. But I'm quite extroverted, as you may tell. If you're an introvert, that can of course be a challenge because you've developed your own close circle of friends, and if none of those guys are intercalating, then you're kind of like, oh, hang on, I'm going to lectures with people I don't know. So whilst it's not necessarily something to have as the key deciding factor, I think it is something that, more so if you're an introverted personality, to give some consideration to and seek some guidance about it. Speak to your mates about it.
That's really good advice. Another question's come in. Was it hard finding a job after graduating?
No. So rightly or wrongly, as a bloke in the veterinary profession, I am now something in the minority. So in years gone by, the veterinary profession was 80% male. It's now 80% female. A lot of the big physical jobs, a lot of the girls didn't want to go and do. There's plenty that did. But the job I was doing was, rural Northumberland, my first job. And that was, big horses, a lot of moderately wild cattle. So it's quite a physical job. So, rightly or wrongly, the sort of bosses are there when there was me and a girl that they both took on at the same time. Frankly, she was much harder than me. But you wouldn't mess with her. But it was dead easy. Now, again, sort of what we're finding in the first time, for the first time in living memory, really, there's veterinary graduates that are coming out in light of COVID-19 who aren't getting offered jobs. Now, I suspect that this is very much a sort of, short, narrow window thing, and it's only going to, God willing, it only affects this year's graduates, because as a profession, we are currently operating on a shortage. So I dare say that those of you applying to vet school now aren't going to struggle to get jobs when you come out, because we've gone through a period of corporatization as a profession, and there are a lot of sort of graduate programs and things like that as well. So and the great thing about a UK veterinary degree as well is that it's very much a global degree now, so you can literally go and work anywhere.
Okay, and I'll ask you one final question because I'm sort of really conscious of time. We've had you for a long time now. James asked, does a veterinary nurse earn as much as a vet? And how much do they earn a year?
That is a brilliant question. Frankly, they should earn more than vets because they are, as I said earlier, like the glue that holds practices together. Unfortunately, the vet nurse is a role in the practice that's been very much underappreciated over the years. So vet nurses have only really recently been accredited and properly celebrated, for my mind. Average salaries, it very much depends, but you're looking anywhere between sort of 18 and 30 grand. So, not particularly well paid at all, especially considering how much they do. Because, as I say, they really do pour everything into the practice. So it is something that is getting better. Their salaries are increasing year on year, and practices are starting to. What we've realised as a profession is that there was a lot of procedures that vets that were doing for many, many years that actually veterinary nurses can do nowadays. So we look at that and say, actually, do you know what? As much as we can pass on to the vet nurses, one, it means that actually they're utilising their skills and their knowledge more. But obviously it keeps them more engaged with their roles, but it gives them an opportunity to earn more. So, it takes about 3 years to 4 years to qualify as a vet nurse. So it's obviously a bit of a quicker course, but definitely it's the financial return on it is much less than vets.
Just having a quick look at the average salary. Here we go. So some figures out at the moment then. At entry level, vet nurses can earn between £18,000 and £22,500. With 5 years experience, salaries can range from 20,500 to about 23,500, and some senior veterinary nurses can earn up to £38,000. It thinks the average salary is around 28,000.
Yeah, that probably makes about sense for sort of like, the more senior vet nurses. And as I say, it's for my money, it's one of the most underappreciated professions out there because they do literally give everything of themselves. So again, it's equally, if not harder, as a job as a vet, but not quite as well paid.
Thanks very much, Ben. I think we've kept you for long enough. That was really, really informative. Thanks for sharing your expertise. Quite difficult when you're talking to a real sort of range of ages, but really good advice there as well. And lots of questions in the conversation box, so you clearly engage the students as well. I'll let the girls leave and I'll say thank you once again for joining us. If any other students would like to ask any further questions, I'm sure Ben and I will hang on for the next 5 minutes to answer them. Is that okay, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going anywhere.